Five candidates are vying to replace Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley on June 22nd. Now, one of those is Calgary MLA Kathleen Ganley, who served as Minister of Justice in Rachel Notley's government. She joins us now actually from our provincial capital in Edmonton. Kathleen, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Now, can you tell our viewers why you believe that you're the best candidate for the job and what it is that kind of makes you stand out compared to some of the other candidates?
Yeah, so my theory of the case, if you will, is that what we need to do to win the next election is to work incredibly hard talking to a lot of folks, because that's how you change hearts and minds with one-on-one conversations, and to tell them a story about the economy, to talk to them about real concrete ideas on why our ideas are better on the economy. The UCP does a very good job of this, of telling people that if they give more money to their bosses, that they'll somehow get ahead. But that story isn't true. And so I think we need to take up a little more of that space with concrete ideas on how to cut people's costs and how to increase their wages.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the other hot button issues you're hearing as you're door knocking. So what are you hearing right now? What's top of mind with people? Obviously, it is the economy, but what else are you hearing?
So most people's top concern right now, I would say, is cost of living, that and probably healthcare as well. So we have a healthcare system that is basically crumbling under the UCP. It's really, well, I mean, it's quite literally in some cases held together with duct tape. And that's because, the people working in that system put their hearts and souls into it because they care so incredibly deeply about the people that they're caring for, that they're willing to sort of, work extra and stretch themselves extra to try and keep that system together. But, they can't do that forever. And it's an awful lot to ask of them. And so, you know, yeah, people are very, very concerned about the healthcare system under the UCP and their failure to do anything about it. They're also deeply concerned about their ability to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage, to afford their groceries.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about inflation right now, the high cost of living. Now, you feel, Kathleen, that Albertans need some kind of tax relief. Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first policies I put out was to increase the personal income tax exemption to $26,000. So that means that people under the low income cutoff wouldn't pay provincial income tax at all. And that would sort of phase out at higher incomes. So at the end of the first bracket. So this would be a program very much targeted at giving relief to families, in who are struggling and families who are in the middle class.
Now, you'd also like to see an increase in the minimum wage here in Alberta, in our province, which I believe is $15 an hour, but for federal workers, it's $17.30. How much of an increase are we talking about?
So if I were premier right now, I would put it up to $16 immediately, $17 next year, and then index it to inflation. In the last 5 years, inflation has gone up 18%. Minimum wage workers, they haven't had a raise of even a dime.
What about the impact, though, on small business owners? That's quite a hit. I mean, $1 an hour, each of the next 2 or 3 years. Have you talked to a lot of business owners? Could they sustain that?
Yeah, so I think that many small business owners already recognize that what turns the local economy more is giving people money to spend in the local economy. And when you give more to those who have less, they have more to spend in that local economy. It's actually helpful to small business. But I think in addition to that, we have started rolling out our offer to small businesses. And one of the first things we've included is, basically temporary no interest loans to cover unpaid accounts receivable. A lot of the problems that we're hearing from small business owners are about sort of cash flow, right? Especially when a larger company has failed to pay their accounts. So we are, trying to help small businesses out with that. So we make sure that we have a robust economy.
Now, Kathleen, Alberta has a very long and storied history of economic success coming from the oil and gas sector. But of course, there are also concerns about how this impacts the environment. Is there a way to see the energy sector continue to thrive while also reducing emissions? Let's talk about some synergy here.
Yeah, I 100% believe that energy has to be a yes and conversation. So we have to talk about uh, supporting oil and gas and supporting new forms of energy. I think the reason we're failing to make progress on this issue is because the UCP and others who have an interest in it have very effectively framed this as an either or conversation. either you can care about change, or you can have a job that pays your mortgage and feeds your family. Increasingly, that's not going to be the case. You know, there is some level of change that's coming, and some of that is addressing climate change, but some of that is just that processes are different at oil and gas companies. They don't need to employ nearly as many people to do the same work. And so, what people should have an interest in is a government that understands what's happening and is, in a position to manage that diversification of our energy portfolio in such a way that it keeps people working and it makes sure that wealth vests to everyone rather than just to a few.
The province recently announced that it's putting millions of dollars investing into the hydrogen sector, 28 big projects, including some projects as well in Calgary and Edmonton. What are your thoughts when it comes to the putting the eggs in the hydrogen basket?
Well, I don't think we should put all our eggs in any one basket. I do think there's a lot of opportunity in hydrogen. There's also a lot of opportunity in geothermal. There's also a lot of opportunity in renewables paired with storage on our electricity grid. So I think that it really does have to be a conversation about exploring all of the possibilities to make sure that we are best placed. Alberta has the minds to be a leader in this for a really long time. And if we invest in those people, if we create the ecosystem where they can thrive, we can be in a position to be exporting our technology, whether that's methane reduction or geothermal technology, to the rest of the world for generations to come.
Now, you touched on electricity here, Kathleen. A lot of Albertans are hurting right now with the high electricity rates. What are your thoughts about trying to get that under control and make life more affordable for Albertans?
Yeah, so I believe the thing that is driving these high electricity rates is price gouging. So it is essentially companies that have a very large share of the power market, and they're therefore able to sell their electricity in at very elevated rates, right? And they are generating massive profits while people struggle. There is a way to control this. The government can step in and limit the amount of profit that can be produced by those companies, and they should.
Now, some people are calling for the Alberta NDP to move a little bit more towards the political center. Now, with that in mind, what are your thoughts on someone like Naheed Nenshi being part of this race and conversation? Do you have any concerns about maybe a change in the direction for the party?
So I think having Naheed in this race is incredibly exciting. I think it'll bring a lot of new voices in. Obviously, I don't think he's the right person to lead the party. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. But I don't think that it necessarily requires a shift to center. I think it requires a shift in our focus. So in the last election, I think everyone whose top issue is healthcare and education probably voted with us, right? Because we had really strong plans on that and we're trusted on it. I think that for a lot of people, their top issue is, how do I pay my mortgage? How do I afford my groceries? And we didn't speak to that particularly well. So I think what we do better next time is not necessarily to shift right, because I think there is a perspective on the economy that is more progressive. And that is the perspective where we give more to those in the middle and those at the bottom to help keep the economy going. Um, and I think that that is the right story. So I don't think that we have to necessarily shift right. I just think we have to talk about the issues that are top of mind for people.
So, what are your thoughts on addressing both the opioid crisis in our province and a lot of the homeless issues we're seeing in many of our cities?
Yeah, so I think, the UCP basically cut all investment in affordable housing about 5 years ago. And I think that we see the results of that program on their part on the streets around us every day. And I think that's incredibly troubling. I obviously spent a lot of time talking to police chiefs when we were in government, and most of them will tell you that the single best investment you can make in public safety in terms of return on dollars is in affordable housing. And so I think like we really need to do that. And we need to invest as well in mental health treatment that runs across the spectrum. The UCP are very focused on this abstinence only treatment. That's the only thing that they will invest in. That's very problematic because it's been the case for at least 25 years that we have known that while that works for some people, it isn't the most effective treatment, i.e., it doesn't work for the most number of people. So we have to provide people with different treatment options that will work for them.
Now, there seems to be a little bit of debate within party ranks as to whether or not rent control would really bring a net benefit to Albertans. How do you see it?
So I think that as a temporary measure, that is absolutely something that any government should be looking at. Lougheed looked at it as well. Um, I do think that there are way more components to the solution than that, right? So there is the investment in affordable housing piece because people who are driven out of that get pushed into the market, that inflates it. But we need to be looking as well around, how we build more, how we encourage things like co-op, how we encourage things like mixed market models that allow, for the long-term sustaining of sort of affordable housing while creating a community, right? So there's a lot of things we need to be doing, but yes, that's certainly something that I think any good government would be looking at, especially, 6 months ago when we introduced the bill and, people were seeing their rents go up by 30-40%.
What about rent evictions? You hear a lot about that too. Landlords will say, no, I'm having my mother move in. I need you guys to move out. Okay, you move out and you find out they just renovated the place and then basically doubled the rent, or like you said, 30-40%. So how do we try and prevent that? A lot of the rent evictions that we're seeing.
Yeah, so I think there is a way for the government to create regulations to manage some of that, not just evicting people for renovations, but like there are in Calgary a lot of units that are owned sort of internationally, and they won't take what the market will bear, and so those units wind up empty, right? So we have housing that isn't in use because of that, and there are ways to control that. There are ways to sort of charge for empty units, to charge for empty lots on which a house could be built, to encourage people to sort of create that ecosystem. Now, I'm not suggesting that I know that people need to pay their mortgage often on those suites. I understand that people, um, you know, are looking to turn a profit, but I do think that when we're generating so much profit at the expense of people having a place to live, that's a problem, and that's a problem the government can solve.
Now, one of your proposals is to restore rural bus service to Alberta. How would you go about doing that? And would that be entirely taxpayer funded?
So there are a lot of bus services that are popping up now in some areas, right? But it's a bit of a patchwork. It doesn't cover everything. So I think we do need to look at how to do that. We can work with existing operators and perhaps use some public dollars to fund other services. But I believe that everyone deserves access to public transit. My father grew up in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, and that's where my grandmother remained until her death. After my grandfather passed, she had macular degeneration. So without the bus, she had no way to get to her family, right? And that's the situation of, many people living in rural communities. And if we want to sustain those rural communities, we have to think about making sure that they have the necessary public infrastructure.
Wait a minute, so you have some Saskatchewan roots. Do you bleed green, rider pride?
So I wasn't myself born
Oh.
in Saskatchewan, so I'm not subject to the same deal that my father was, where you have to cheer for the riders till the end of existence.
So Kathleen, any final thoughts on why party members should vote for you?
Because I want to build a world where everyone has a chance to succeed. I want my daughter to have the same opportunities here that I have, and I think I have a concrete plan and policies to make sure that that's the world we build.
Kathleen Ganley is one of the 5 candidates running in the Alberta NDP leadership race. The new leader to succeed Rachel Notley will be chosen on June 22nd. Kathleen, thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
Thank you.